Good. Just busy on 440 as you're getting up into the area right around Victory Boulevard. I'm Tom O'Hanlon in the WCBS Traffic Center.
Well, here's the weather forecast from the WCBS party at 70 in Manhattan. We're heading for a high of 77. It's clear tonight, with a low of 63 in the city, 50s in most of the burbs. And tomorrow, the high temperature around near 80 degrees. We're saying goodbye to WCBS News Radio 880, a radio station that traces its roots to 100 years ago, 1924. Can you believe it? It's remarkable. And what is remarkable is our history as a news radio station. I want to talk to Tim Sheld, who was a reporter here and then moved into the management team. He was always a comforting presence to know that a guy who had been on the street as a reporter also was in the management office. And I'm wondering if your experience as a reporter, as an employee of WCBS, shaped what you did in that office. You knew what it was like to do the job.
Totally, because this is a very, very hard job to do. Being on the air, giving up your family, being, called and having to come in at the worst moments of your life and talk to a whole community to help them through floods, fires, pandemics, that kind of thing. So you needed to lead with a little humanity because you needed to bring people in from their families. I mean, think of Sandy. Many of us who were in this room, slept on the floor. In the middle of the night when the storm was raging, Michael Wallace was at the microphone, Alex Silverman was at the battery, and I was in this room with, we were the ones that were up all night long during the storm. And so my work as a reporter made me think that I better treat the people who worked in the newsroom with as much humanity as I could because, they really are, the heart and soul of an operation. And Harvey's over there. You don't have to bring him on, but he's responsible for me being both a reporter because he brought me over with Bernie. I was at WOR Radio, and Harvey was running CBS. And I came over and was a reporter in the late 80s, early 90s. And then Harvey was the one who whispered in my ear and said, WCBS is looking for a news director. Would you be interested? When I was a network correspondent at ABC News. And so Harvey is responsible for me arriving as a reporter and me arriving as a manager to this place.
And you're also responsible for me coming into this room as an anchor. I can tell the story on the air of how I came into your office and you literally were pinching the bridge of your nose and you had your eyes closed. And the first word you said was, listen. And I said, well, Tim, that's the beginning of every great radio conversation.
What is the line that you used to use, the WCBS face? Remember that? What is it?
CBS face. It's kind of a scrunched up face. You squint your eyes. That's why we have the crow's feet on either side of our eyes.
Yeah, Tim had issue face. You knew there was an issue when you saw that look on his face. Hey, do you have Alex ready to go over there?
I know.
Yeah, he's good to go. He's on, let's see, Hugo 81.
Oh, hey, Alex, remember Hugo 81?
I sure do. Hey, guys.
Alex Silverman, I love this story. It has to do with weed.
Oh, we want to tell this
Oh, of course we're going to tell this story. Go ahead. You tell the story.
Alex still works for the company, just so you know.
That's all right. That's okay. This is a fine story, and it's legal in most states.
At Syracuse University, and I had done a story for a radio class there about weed, about smoking weed. And that's actually how I got my first job. A program director in Syracuse heard that story and decided they wanted to put me on the air. But around that time, I was listening, and this was back in the aughts when you could first start streaming stations from around the country. And I was listening to WCBS at the gym at college. And I heard, it was 4:20 that day, I think at 4:20 p.m., and you, Wayne, said on the air, made some reference to smoking weed on 420. And I tweeted, and again, this is the very beginning of Twitter. We didn't really understand the implications as a college kid. I can't believe Wayne Cabot on WCBS just made a 420 reference. Nothing happened for a week. A week later, Steve Scott, who I think had just come back from a conference where he learned how to search Twitter, replied to my tweet and said, Wayne was so excited that you noticed his 420 reference. And I said, oh, my God, Wayne Cabot at WCBS, who I grew up listening to, thinks I'm a horrible stoner, flunky kid. So I got to do something about this. So I found Wayne's email address somewhere on the internet. I sent you an email, not thinking anything would happen. Not 5 minutes later, I get an email back from you, the nicest thing I've ever seen in writing in the world, inviting me to the radio station, telling me listen to my work as a young reporter in radio in Syracuse. And the next thing I knew, I was in Tim's office, and Tim was hiring me to be a reporter and anchor at WCBS a couple of years later. And so I have both of you and 420 to thank.
Well, I think your emotions ran the gamut with me, because soon you became a manager who at times became furious at me.
I don't think I was ever furious.
Oh, there was the whole Rush Limbaugh incident. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah. Rush Limbaugh called us out on something, and I addressed it on the air.
And then he talked about it, right? And he talked about it again.
Yeah.
And he was shocked that you were such a nice guy. Or something like that.
Something like that.
But let me say that Alex was one of the best reporters we ever had. And this is in a room filled with some of the best reporters. Steve Burns is here. Sean is sitting next to me. Debbie's here. Debbie was a reporter early on. We worked together at WR. But Alex was one of the best reporters we had in my time at this radio station, and one of the best anchors. And to lose him as a reporter and an anchor to become a manager was really hard for the organization. But it was better for Alex, I think. And look, he's in a terrific place now, but he has a real place in history for the radio station.
Well, it's incredible to hear you say that, Tim, and I have you to thank for it, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person today. And you were talking about Sandy earlier, and whenever I think about my time reporting at WCBS, it comes to mind because it was definitely the biggest, most kind of broadly impactful thing that I covered. And I was thinking this week about a moment when I was out there in Lower Manhattan covering Sandy, and I was, it was dark, it was flooded, I was looking up at the New York Stock Exchange and the lights were out. And I kind of blurted out this line, and it struck me as bizarre at the time, but I said, I've never felt more alone in New York City. Wow. And you know what I realized a couple of days after that, when I started getting messages from all over the region and actually all over the country from people who had heard us that night, from their dinner tables and from their cars and their houses with no power, and they said, you kept us company. The most important thing that you did was you reassured us. And it kind of hit me in that moment that I was not alone. And that was the whole point. The entire point of what we're doing here, when we are talking, when people are hearing us, they are hearing themselves. And they are not alone. And you've asked a lot of people this week what you think the legacy of the radio station is. For me, that's it. It's that people were not alone. We were a companion. We gave them hope. And, we believed we'd always be there.
Always the reporter, Alex, and you put it so well there. Your remarks are... I mean, the room has finally fallen silent. Harvey, what do you think?
What he had to say, and I think that the people at the radio station don't realize the impact that they have, particularly at moments of crisis, because there are literally hundreds of thousands of people who turn to the radio station. And you can see that in the outpouring and the response from people who have talked about the demise of the radio station and how important it was to them and what it means to them and how important it was as they went about their daily lives. And the jobs that you guys do day in and day out is unheralded, and it's going to be a huge loss to the tri-state area.
Harvey Nagler, Tim Sheld, Chris Quimby, our present managers. We have about 30 managers out there, and no one has yet come in here to yell at us for blowing the format up. We didn't get the traffic and weather together on the 8s this time. We will not be doing it after Monday. But you know what we're going to do? Just this one time. One more time.
One more time?
Set your time to WCBS News 88. 4 tones will follow. The 4th and final tone marks the exact time.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Steve Kathan. Democratic convention delegates are set to give the presidential ticket what's likely to be a rousing send-off tonight. CBS's Matt Piper is...
WCBS 880 News. The People.
Monday in the morning at News Radio 88, WCBS. Dave Flanders and WCBS News Radio 88, mobile unit number 1.
The Moments.
An unidentified man who is apparently walking on a tightrope between the towers of the World Trade Center.
The events that shaped our lives.
All I can tell you is there was severe electrical storm to the north, just prior to the blackout here.
Strike Schmike, enough already.
The anxiety is setting in about how I'm going to get home, and I haven't gotten to work yet.
Here's Wayne Cabot, Homer Nain, and Bridget Quinn.
It's a rare thing to have a New York politician who actually understands how the radio works and what it's like to be on the radio and the challenges of radio. But we were lucky to have that with the former governor of New York, David Paterson, on the line.
Governor Paterson, wow, it's great to have you back on the radio again. It's been a little while, and I just remember having spoken with you about what a connection this particular radio station has to you. I love that story. Thanks for coming on with us. It means the world.
Well, it's as I was growing up in Long Island, and I couldn't read the newspaper because I'm legally blind, and the television had not embraced the news the way it has today. This was really my interest at first when WINS started in 1955. Then News Radio 88 in 1967, which I liked more because, first of all, I like to hear the news without hearing a teletype behind it. And secondly, because I just thought that the coverage was more extensive. And I remember in 1968, and I believe the newsman was Palmer Payne, he delivered the message that Martin Luther King had been murdered in Tennessee. And just, big moments where my first understanding of it came from listening to this station. I'm really sorry that this is going away.
Yeah, we are too. And I know how meaningful it was to all of us when you became governor of New York, and suddenly we had the inside track. That was nice. How you doing, by the way? How you doing?
Station.
we think about you a lot. We really do. And we revere our listeners, and there's so many over the years, and you probably had the most success of any of them. And I hear you on the radio still. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I hear you on the radio still. You got your opinions. It's an interesting time in American history, and it's getting more and more difficult, isn't it, in this news environment to get real information out?
It really is, and I think that was what the standard of when all news stations first came on was not only to report the news, but to report it accurately and not to jump to conclusions sometimes as you see in the print media. And that's why I so appreciated listening to the station. I remember the first day prior to the station coming on, they had a psychiatrist whose name was Dr. Rose Franzblatt. And she used to do pieces on 88. So then they incorporated her into the whole news channel, news station. But that didn't last too long. And they had another daily feature called Spectrum. And it would come on 9 times, and different reporters and people of note would comment and talk about things going on in society. So there was really a tremendous amount of creativity at the station that I always appreciated.
I thought WCBS sounded important, but you raise an important point too, Governor, that it was really a cast of thousands here. You could turn on this radio station, and maybe that's what made it sound important, that there were so many people involved in putting it together.
Oh, absolutely. And, Irene Cornell and some of the other news people, and that they would go right in the thick of the fire. Now, I remember one time with you, Paul, when they had this event called the Million Youth March, and they flew a helicopter over it, and it upset the crowd, and they all started running for cover. And as I'm running for cover, I saw you, and we did an interview while we were both fleeing the scene.
I remember that, Governor. I remember that.
Governor David Paterson, you remember the name Bill Than, don't you?
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
A mainstay on WCBS. And I'd like to, Governor, thank you for coming on with us. And I'm going to gift you and all of us with that marvelous voice once again. We heard from his daughter, Robin, just yesterday. And she said, I hope I'll be hearing my dad's voice. Well, here's a classic Bill Than on WCBS. And wait till you hear how quick the helicopter traffic reporter is, Lou Timelot, when Bill makes a rare gaffe. Here we go.
U.S. Navy has just announced that it has suspended dumping of obsolete munitions in the oceans until all alternative methods of disposal have been studied. And I just got myself in deep trouble with the Musicians Union. Here's Lou Timolot.
Well, Bill, I thought from there we had heard the last of Hoagie Carmichael, but I was glad we're just losing some munitions.
As they say, that's a keeper, that one.
Oh, I love that. Hoagie Carmichael reference on WCBS at 12:08.
Here's Tom O'Hanlon with the traffic story, Tom.
You know, that brings back a fun memory. When I was in college, a friend got me a ride in the WCBS traffic helicopter with Lou, and we flew around the Empire State Building antenna. Among other things, we even buzzed Fordham when I was a Fordham student. Well, checking out what's going on in Westchester, we are stacked up on 287 on the westbound side from the Sprain Parkway to the...
At the anchor desk, Jim Dodling and Robert Vaughn.
Weather is what I report on. I'm Craig Allen.
And still reporting on it right now in the WCBS Weather Center. Hello, Craig Allen.
This is the Weather Center right here, right now. And,
wherever you are.
Wherever I am. And here's the interesting thing. It's 88 degrees right now, and we are plus or minus 5 degrees of that. So in honor of Harvey Nagler, that is the weather guarantee for today. We're going for a high of 88. That means that if I get that, I mean, really, 5 degrees either side. Thank you so much for that, Harvey. I mean, he's over there in the corner. He's like, yeah, I remember that. It was great.
You know what? It worked. We had a bin.
You better believe it.
Bin of postcards we got. A massive bin of postcards.
Right.
People were all into that contest.
You better believe it. And you know what we spoke about earlier this morning, and I'll do it later. We never had a jingle for weather, correct?
Great. Are you going to sing one?
No, absolutely not. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that today is going to be sunny. It'll be up there in the 70s, despite the weather guarantee. We don't have $1,000 to give out right now anyway, so it doesn't matter.
The entire radio industry doesn't have $1,000.
As for tomorrow, look for another delightful day coming up, and each day is going to get warmer as we get on into the upcoming weekend. Craig Allen, WCBS Weather Center.
One of my best friends in the whole world is on with us right now on the telephone, I understand, from, I guess it's Santa Fe, New Mexico. Is that where you are now, Mikey?
Rio Rancho, down the road from Santa Fe.
This is Michael Kahn, who was not on the air at WCBS, but was probably the heart and soul of this radio station, in my opinion, for a good long time in the 1980s and 1990s, who knows where the bodies are buried, and has seen people come and go, including himself, as a matter of fact. Hey, Michael, I got to say, you are one of my best friends in the whole world, and I wanted you to come on and tell the story, because we just mentioned Bill Fain a minute ago, who we worked with. And you have a great story about coming in from Rockland County for your early morning writing shift.
Well, Bill, of course, had the voice of God. And one morning back, I guess it was in the early 90s, something had happened, and WCBS was airing emergency broadcast system activations. There were always tests, but for some reason we started running activations, which, of course, nobody who grew up in New York had ever heard this. Anyway, it's about 4:45 one morning. I'm in my apartment in White Plains getting ready to walk to the train station. I put on WCBS on my Walkman, and the first thing I hear out of the headphones is Bill Fain announcing, "This is not a test. I repeat, this is not a test," followed by that tone. And I thought for sure this was the end of the world, or the Russians were marching down the thruway, or whatever it was. And it turned out, of course, it was raining on Long Island or something. But it was classic Bill Fain. In fact, in 2007, the Daily News did a little survey of readers about their all-time favorite DJ lineups. And I wrote into David Hinckley, and I submitted, instead of Dan Ingram or Ron Lundy, I said, how about Pat and Ben and Lou and Jim and, some of the classics on WCBS. And I was quoted in that article as saying that when the end of the world comes, I want to hear it on WCBS from Bill Fain.
He had that voice of God.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, before you run, the legacy of WCBS, you're a wordsmith. You wrote for the Associated Press, for CBS, CBS Network. Tell us about that. UPI and probably a few other places that still owe you money. Tell us about the legacy of WCBS.
Well, I hope to collect that AP pension one day. The legacy of WCBS. I've heard a lot this morning about the great voices, John Wydra, Harvey Houtman, Bob Glenn, so many people. A lot of people behind the scenes who, of course, are not mentioned. I would just like to quickly mention my late friend Dick Spencer, who was a great influence to me when I worked at 88, taught me how to run a news desk. Beyond that, the legacy is just incredible. The station itself, it's the station where, you talk about the end of the world. Orson Welles broadcast the War of the Worlds on WCBS. It was the station my dad always had on in the car, in the office, in the house. It was where I wanted to work as a kid. You and I, Wayne, we were the kids who listened to Pat and Ben instead of Dan Ingram in the afternoon. This station, the way this station will be missed, it cannot be understated.
You mentioned Dick Spencer, the morning producer here at WCBS, who had a wonderful test that he would run in his mind to see if a story was relevant and interesting. And he would talk about this is what Mrs. Spencer wanted to hear. And we decided we were going to cover more lifestyle stories, and it was a slow news morning. And I was sent to cover, I kid you not, they were going to have a bunch of brides in bridal gowns, and they had a huge wedding cake in the middle of Times Square. And the brides were going to jump in, and there was a prize somewhere in the cake. And if they won the prize, they won the prize. But there was going to be this big wrestling match and a cake in the middle of morning drive. So I got there. Do the 6 a.m. I do the 6 a.m. report. It's 7 a.m. Oh, 7 a.m. It's going to happen, this event, at like 9 o'clock or something. So finally it happens. In the meantime, I had discovered that it wasn't just a real cake. It was actually largely Crisco. So this thing now is turning into a greased wrestling match. Wrestling match in the middle of Times Square at 9 o'clock in the morning. They blow the whistle. The brides jump in. My phone rings, and it's Dick Spencer. And he says, Mrs. Spencer wants to know how the greasy wrestling match is going. He had that was his way. That was his way. He was a wonderful morning producer, and I think the Mrs. Spencer test was the thing that really worked, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. There's no question. Dick understood about talking to the audience, not at the audience. He was really very good at that. Excellent.
I'm so glad we mentioned him, because there are so many names that we want to make sure that we mention as WCBS goes away. And Michael, I'm so glad that we mentioned your name, and we want to thank all the writers and the producers and the wonderful, the force of the Writers Guild at WCBS, and thank you all for your work.
Well, it was a pleasure. It was a thrill of my life. And boys, I just can I do one thing before I go?
Sure.
Can I give the legal ID? Because I never did it, and I'll never get the chance again.
Go right ahead.
WCBS, New York.
Well done, Michael. You're hired for the next day and a half. Hey, you mentioned Bob Glenn. Your ID was a whole hell of a lot better than his ID. You ready for this?
13 minutes before 7 o'clock on WCBS News Radio 88, your station for news and information in New York, New Jersey, and Kentucky.
On Michael's story about the Russians coming down the thruway, they would have been easier to take Kentucky. If they'd taken the thruway and got to the Tappan Zee, they would have said, forget it, they can keep it.
Tom O'Hanlon, any sign of Russians on the thruway?
Well, let's see. Gosh, I hope not. No sign. Looks like we're clear so far, but we'll keep an eye on it. Well, that thruway's doing okay. We're looking at the Rockland County side of the Tappan Zee Bridge, and you're good. Now, it's been a real workout trying to get to Rockland by way of the Tappan Zee. Not the bridge itself so much now, but they cleaned up that car fire from earlier and had to do some work. So that means the westbound side of 287, we're still packed pretty tight from the Sprain on over. In Connecticut, going up 95, not bad at all. Stop and go in the southbound side in Norwalk, and the Merritt's pretty slow in New Canaan. Long Island, the LIE in the northern state are busy into Queens. Now, the Cross Island Parkway still has stop and go.
The radio weather experience here on WCBS, and we are gifted to have Todd here right now giving us an actual forecast, or are you stealing it from AccuWeather?
Whatever Craig had in front of him 10 minutes ago. But it turns out that Craig and I together have 88 years on WCBS, and that is the actual number. We are blessed. So how about this? Blessed with the weather. Bright sunshine, some clouds today. 77. Now let's make it near 88. That's close enough. Clear and comfortable tonight. Really nice overnight. 63 in town, 50s in the suburbs. Another beautiful day tomorrow. Scattered clouds. Temperatures near 80. Sunday warm, a little bit more humid. Temperatures will be in the mid 80s. And Monday, it's going to be nice as well, but you won't be able to hear it here on WCBS, and we will miss you dearly.
I hope they do the weather. I hope they mention it once in a while, but you know what? It's up to them. It's their station, right? Yeah. It's great to have you. You know, we have such a legendary list of meteorologists, and you and Craig are the brightest stars because you're the names that have come up all the time.
Well, thank you, guys. And I just want to add to what Michael Kahn said. The thing that I remember most about coming into this radio station, whether it was in person or on the phone or down the line, no matter who was on the air or who was off the air behind the scenes, it was the same because we were one WCBS family. It was consistent. It was the best. And that's what I'll remember most about WCBS.
Thank you, Todd.
Amen to that.
Hey, you know what I got over here? Speaking of weather people, you want to hear a little Gordon Barnes and Jerry Nachman from 1975?
Sure.
Probably doing what everyone would expect WCBS to do. They're in the middle of a blizzard and they're talking about it.
For the rest of today, cloudy skies, gusty winds out of the northeast, and snow, which will be moderate at times, total accumulations of 3 to 5 inches. However, there's a pretty good chance in some areas that those amounts will be higher than the 3 to 5, and temperatures will be holding steady and in the 20s. Currently, the airports are reporting moderate snow, and of course, whether or not that's affecting travel, I'll ask Jerry about that in just a moment, but the center of the storm now seems to be right around Norfolk, Virginia, and it's still trying to get organized. So this moderate to heavy snow that we are currently experiencing can be around for another few hours and then tapering off to a light snow by mid or late afternoon and then tapering off to flurries later on tonight. Jerry Nachman, have you got any reports from the airports?
Earlier this morning, Gordon, they were saying that they were below visible minimums, and I expect by this time we're starting to have delays on takeoffs and landings as soon as we know that for certain. Here's something. All Eastern Airlines shuttle flights to and from Washington and Boston have been canceled through 1 o'clock. So if you planned on shuttling via Eastern to Washington and Boston between now and 1 o'clock, you're not going to be able to do it.
Isn't that radio? That's WCBS radio. Something happened instantly and it was on the air that fast.
No Eastern Airlines, no Pan Am.
Can you imagine? Anyway, Jerry Nachman there with Gordon Barnes, WCBS, 1975.
While we're on a weather jag here, I want to bring in just plain Bob Harris in the WCBS Weather Center. You recall the controversy, right? He was on the air, meteorologist Dr. Bob Harris.
He called himself
He wasn't
doctor.
a meteorologist or a doctor. I don't even think his name was Bob, to tell you the truth. But he was phenomenal. He was so good and so smart. I still recall the Daily News headline when he was outed as not having that degree in geophysics at Columbia University. And the Daily News headline said, "Forecasters' lack of degrees raises temperatures." Anyway, here's Bob Harris on WCBS with Jim Donnelly.
It's between 59 and 64, and Friday, hazy sunshine, a bit of Indian summer again. Temperatures in the upper 60s on Friday. Right now, clear, 53 degrees at WCBS.
Okay, time to call the airline so they can put me on hold. Maybe play me a little tune. Hey, what am I going to do with all the time they're saving me? I mean, this is New York. I'm not supposed to have all this time.
You don't. It's 7:01.
Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone?
Amen, Joni, right?
Yeah.
Truer words never spoken. Everything is an exit anthem, musically, you know, and that's what we've been going through since we got the news about our station.
I just want to really thank, because it's going to take us both, Paul, and everybody out there in the newsroom, days and days to respond to the literally thousands of emails and even letters, those snail mail letters, and phone calls in the newsroom.
Yeah.
The phone, I'm not joking. Yesterday I was out there because I did the modern-day equivalent of getting a huge cardboard box to get my stuff, and the modern-day equivalent is a flash drive, and I'm taking all these files, and I heard this noise. And it was the phone ringing, and nobody was picking up. I looked behind me, and the entire newsroom was empty because there was a Writers Guild meeting to discuss whatever they had to go through. So I picked up the phone, and it was somebody saying, "I just want to say I've been listening for 35 years, and how much you've meant to me." And then I thanked them and hung up, and then the phone rang again. "I just want to tell you I've been listening for 26 years, how much you meant to me," and the phone hasn't stopped.
And I've decided my first day, not being at WCBS, I'm going to try and answer all of the messages that I've received just personally, so I have something to do. Tim Sheld, you were famous for returning every single email and every single phone call, every complaint you dealt with, and you dealt with it personally. I thought your head was going to explode in there.
Well, if I can tell an off-color story, Wayne, because you know that I don't do that very often.
It's about time. We've waited years for this.
I was so angry at a listener email that I got one year, and I don't even remember what it was about, and I sat and rewrote that email. Sean's looking at me because he knows that I used to do that. I would pick up the phone, the newsroom would say, there's a listener on the phone, and they knew that I would like to talk to them. And it wasn't a challenge. It was, these people cared enough to find our number and call us. I was working on this complaint email response, and then I'm about to hit send, and I looked at the email, and it was gaspasser31 at AOL.com, and I'm thinking...
Wayne's response is priceless.
Wayne's like, does that mean there were 30 other gas passers?
Well, a few of them might have sat in Paul's anchorage here. I've been hearing for years.
You know, Google's right next door, and the guys in the Gmail department right now are saying, listen, we've got to get these guys out of the system.
Can I just say one thing, just because I heard you talking and I wanted to pick up the headphones and say, I don't know if you heard the show that WNYC did yesterday or the day before. Did you hear that?
No.
We've been busy.
WNYC did a half-hour segment on the loss of WCBS, and Jerry Barmash, who is a friend of all of ours in the media and is a talented broadcaster and now an author who has written about TV anchors and has a terrific book out there, Jerry came in the studio and did a half-hour show with Allison Stewart. I apologize if I got her name wrong. They did a half an hour, and they took calls. They took calls from listeners on WNYC, who's a neighbor around the corner, right, about the loss of WCBS in the market, and the heartfelt phone calls that were on that radio station about this radio station really stuck me.
Yeah.
I sat and listened to it. It was a half an hour, and it was what Harvey was saying, that we do what we do. We did what we did without thought who's listening on the other end. And now we're hearing from all the people that were listening on the other end about how important we were for what they did. And that's not a self-important comment. Yeah. We're just hearing people say that you meant so much and your loss is going to mean so much to us.
Well, you understand that what's significant about this is had we just sort of withered on the vine and atrophied and maybe, well, we'll do news in the morning and then maybe do some talk in the middle of the day and maybe do some sports later, and faded away, we would have been like a lot of other once great stations that faded. Instead, it's being removed at a point when it's at its peak, when people still love, revere, remember, need, use the radio station. So there's something missing. There's now a void. And as Joni Mitchell said, you don't know what you got till it's gone, and now we know it's going to be gone, and we feel it.
I worry that future generations are going to look at the little piece of glass in their hand and the text on a screen, that one-dimensional thing, and think that's the news. We did an interview the other day, Wayne, and I said, the news is not a push notification. It's not.
Yes, but a push notification can get you to what you want from the news, and that's really the future.
But you know what? When the rain was coming down the other day, I had so many.
Don't disagree.
Because I have them from from my various
gas
sources.
Passer. You don't know if Gas Passer is sending it. That's the beauty of the brand, is that when somebody sees something from a WCBS, you can bank on it. When there's a plane down in the Hudson, if it's Joe at Joe33 on Twitter, there's a plane down. You don't know that that's true, but when you see it from WCBS, you're like, oh my God, there's a plane down.
Yeah, but you know, I need the human voice. I need someone telling it to me as well.